Multiform is a framework that allows you to create a power that can shift from one form to another, right? So it's really good, for instance, for making shapeshifters, where a character might have multiple forms, physical forms, each physical form having radically different powers. And the multi-form allows you to shift between those forms. It's also really good for creating like a modular weapon where it has very different effects, but you have to reconfigure the weapon in order to have those different effects. Multiforms are structured differently than element controls. Don't have a control, they have a pool instead. And that is a pool of points that is shared by the slots in that multiform. And the hero can toggle from one slot to another with a half phase action, right? Here's how you go about building one. First, you assign the pool's value, which must be a multiple 5. Once you've decided on what that pool is going to be, then you start building slots, right? Each of the slots can be as small as 5 points or as large as the total points in the pool. And that would be including advantages, right? One special thing to note about slots in a multiform is that they can include characteristics as well as powers. Once you're done building the slots, you're ready to reduce the points for each of the slots. And you do this by dividing the point total of each of the slots by 5, which brings them down significantly, right? That reduction being done, you then apply any limitations to the reduced value, right? So those are the rules for working with multiforms. Let me show you the power that we're going to use to demonstrate how to work with them in the hero calculator. The power we're going to use is a syringe gun. And this is a modular weapon that fires different types of syringes with different serums in them. In this case, we're going to build two of its cartridges, right? One is an enervator serum, which will drain the target's endurance. We're going to attach the advantage ranged to that because normally drain is not a ranged power. And we're going to apply the tricky mild burnout limitation to model the fact that the syringe gun has limited ammunition, right? Um, the second slot is going to be a tranquilizer slot, and that's going to be modeled using the component blast. And it's going to have the advantage severe brutal because it bypasses defenses more often than not. And finally, we're also going to attach the tricky mild burnout limitation for the same reason to model the ammunition aspect of the gun. Okay, let's jump into the hero calculator and show you how this works. All right. So again, the first thing we are going to do is that we are going to enter the power. In this case, we're going to enter um the the pool, and we're going to call it syringe gun, and it's going to be a, let's call this a 45, actually let's call it, yeah, multi-form, and then in parentheses we'll put 45 points. Okay. So that's going to be 45 active points, no advantages. So no advantage value, 45 points. We have to confirm that here. And that expresses all the way across. So we have 45 points in the total points column. Then we're going to start building the slots. So let me go ahead and build the first slot, which is the enervator serum. And that's going to be grain 6d6. Let's bold the power, and this is going to be 30 active points. In 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 this case, we have the ranged advantage, which is 0.5. So we enter the 0.5 on the advantages value column. So that's a 45 point uh, power so far. The heightened points are 45. We have to confirm that value there, and that's that. Okay, so then we're going to build the second slot, and that's going to be the tranquilizer, tranquilizer serum. I don't know if serum is the right word there, but anyway, whatever. Blast 66, and we'll bold that. Okay, so that's going to be a 30-point power, and it's going to be severe brutal for zero point 0.5, and then we'll enter the zero point 0.5 into the advantages value, so that's also a 45-point power. All right, and then we have to confirm that. So there we go. So there we go. We have a 45 point multiform. Okay. And then we have the two slots. The bolding didn't take place like I wanted it to. Here we go. All right. There we go. So we have the two slots, and now we have to reduce them, right? So we're going to double click on the cell, and we're going to hit /5, which is divided by 5, and / again /5, which is divided by 5. All right. And that gives us two 9-point slots, right? And now we can apply the limitations to that reduced value. So it's going to be a tricky, mild burnout for both of those, which is a 0.25 limitation. I'll just cut and paste that into the next one because it's the same thing. All right. And then 0.25 in that column and 0.25 there as well. So 7.2, 7.2. So 7 points for each of those slots, right? And that's the process. By the way, throughout all of this, I haven't said anything about column G. Column G really is only there uh, to when I first made this sheet and I was still getting used to, how you worked with the reductions, I would just enter the instruction there for me to remind me. So I would write like divide by 5, divide by 5, and that was to remind me that I had to divide this number by 5 because I didn't want to forget. If it were an element control, I would write reduce by the control cost, reduce by the control cost in that column to remind me. It was like training wheels to make sure that I didn't skip the step or that I knew where the step had to happen. I never use that anymore. It's kind of an artifact. It's just there. Probably nobody else would use it. I only used it for about a week until I became just accustomed to doing it. Now I just automatically do it. So anyway, it just occurred to me that I should explain as to why that column was there and we haven't used it at all. Okay? But anyway, that explanation aside, that is how you work with multiforms. All right, with multiforms out of the way, let's jump over to variable power pools. Now, a variable power pool is the most flexible of all of the frameworks. And it's really there to model characters that can do just about anything with their powers. So, for example, maybe you have a master of a particular element who has such a broad control and such a versatile control over that element that they can do just about anything. Well, maybe you don't want to have specific powers laid out. Instead, you want to just be able to use a chunk of points to do whatever comes to mind. And you'd be building, as a player, you would be building powers on the fly to reflect, right, the character's um, versatility. All right. Or maybe you have a character like the Green Lantern whose power ring just allows them to do just about anything, right? Especially later on in their publication run. So that would be a way of building a character like that. And the rules around variable power pools are as such. Variable power rules have a control and a pool, but they don't have slots, right? The points in the pool are used to build powers during play, And this is how you build it. It's really easy to build a variable power pool, right? First thing is that you have to assign the pool's value, and that value has to be a multiple of 10. After you've built the pool's value, or you've assigned the pool's value, you take half of that amount, and that becomes the control's value, right? So if you have a 100-point pool, your control value is going to be 50. Right? And then you're basically done. After you do that, you only really have one more decision. You can either leave the control as it is, and if you do that, it means that you can shift the power during play, but not in the midst of action, right? So in the middle of a combat, you wouldn't be able to switch from one power to the other, but in sort of a downtime, you'd be able to reconfigure the pool however you want so that you have those powers ready for when you get into action. Your other option is to leave the control as is, but add a 5-point control skill to your skills, and then
Uh,
you can use that skill to change the pool's configuration during an action scene, but it would take a half phase action and you'd have to make that roll. Finally, you could choose to apply the kaleidoscope advantage to the control. And the kaleidoscope advantage would allow you to shift your points at will as a zero phase action um, during combat. So it's the most versatile of all the options. So let's take a look at the example that we're going to use to demonstrate how to work with variable power pools in the hero calculator. We're going to build a weird science variable power pool. It's going to have control, it's going to have a pool, and we're going to give it the hero a control skill to be able to change it with a half phase action in the midst of play. All right. Let's take our final dive into the hero calculator to build this variable power pool. All right, so here we go. The first thing that we're going to do, as is always the case, we're going to enter the weird science um, power, right, which is really the name of the power pool. And then we're going to say variable power pool. We're going to give this 30 points. Okay. So we'll enter the 30 there under the active points. We have to confirm them. So that's 30 points for the pool. Then we have to record the control. That's going to be half that value. So that'll be 15. We'll confirm the 15. And that's it. It it took an allocation of 45 points total to have that variable power pool. The last thing we need to do is to go to our skills page and add weird science as the control skill, and that'll be 5 points. All right. And with that, we have just finished building our variable power pool. They're very easy to build. Of course, challenge comes during play when you're constantly building powers, right? But that's it. So at this point, I've shown you how to work with all three of the frameworks, and we are done with. There's one last thing. There is, however, one last thing that I should show you, and that is over here on the final points and ratio page. We have some leftover work, right, from earlier in the tutorial. We've allocated some points to characteristics, we've allocated some points to powers, and then to skills, right? So you'll notice that we have 40 points allocated to characteristics, 45 points allocated to powers, 20 points allocated to skills. It's all coming to a total of 105 points. This character still has 95 points left to allocate, and you'll notice over here that the ratio is 119. Now, you could go to the Champions Now rulebook to learn how to calculate the ratio, but the hero calculator is doing all those calculations for you. All you really have to do is look at this number and let it tell you what it's going to tell you. The ratio for a hero can't be higher than 119, right? So this character is actually cool right now. It's fine. But if I added some more limitations to this character at this point, that ratio would jump up higher than 119, and that would be the hero calculator telling me that I have to adjust those limitations down because the character is becoming unbalanced for play. Villains can have a higher ratio. They can be as high as 129. Okay. Um, but I just wanted to make sure that I showed you um, that that number was there and to give you the values that you need to watch out for when you're building heroes and villains. All right. So, with that being said, we've come to the end of the tutorial. I think I've explained everything that you could possibly want to do with this tool. If you decide to use it, please feel free to send me feedback or to send me improvements. Um, but, I hope this has been interesting to somebody, and I hope that it's helpful to somebody. And if you've watched to the end of this tutorial, thank you for your interest. Please come back. I will be posting some material for the campaign that I'm currently running and for any campaigns that I'll be running in the future. So until then, I wish you good health, good cheer, and good gaming.